Today I will be asking the question, where would the 2024 Arnold Classic champion Hadi Choopan have placed at the 2025 Arnold Classic with his Arnold winning version? Thanks to this amazing footage provided by Superset Man, we will be able to see Hadi Choopan side by side with the top 4 from the 2025 Arnold Classic. That top 4 consisted of Derek Lunsford, who won the show, runner-up Samson Dauda, and then 3rd and 4th Andrew Jagged and Brandon Curry. This of course is part of the Superset Man challenge. This is the 3rd one I've been a part of, and I want to thank Superset Man for the invite. But we have a ton to talk about and discuss. This is a loaded question with large implications, so let's not waste any more time and jump into the 3rd round of the Superset Man challenge, Hadi Choopan at the 2025 Arnold Classic. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. For this comparison, I think the only way I can even try to make somewhat accurate calls is if I trim the fat, so to speak. We'll use the footage and screenshots from that footage that Superset Man provided, but I'm going to break most of the poses down into sections after that for an in-depth look. We'll take a look at the full video of Hadi on stage in its entirety after we go through the mandatory poses. So here's the first call out in all of its glory, but I want to break this down into 2 groups. First off, we have Samson versus Brandon, which I see as battling it out to not get last. I should also mention that I am ranking these guys 1st to 5th. Then at the end, we will add up all the scores, and the lower the score, the better. Anyway, in regards to Brandon, I have a feeling this won't be the most pleasant comparison for him. The truth is that if this was the actual first call out, it wouldn't stay that way for long. And I think they'd probably take Brandon out first. Maybe Andrew would be taken out as well, but we'll see how this shakes out. Between Brandon and Samson here, I am going with Samson. He has the better balance, and he's bigger with an even more exaggerated shape compared to Brandon. But Brandon is more conditioned and harder. I suppose he also has the better arm. Note how I didn't use the plural there because Brandon's left arm is definitely atrophied. And I hate to nitpick, but that's really distracting. I won't have too much time in this comparison to flesh out my full opinions, so if you guys want some more in-depth answers on why I ranked each guy where, feel free to leave a comment. We can have a diplomatic discussion on our favorite oiled up men. Out of these 2 here, I am going with Samson to place ahead just because he's bigger with great shape. But we get a big step up in quality from those 2 with our remaining 3 competitors. These are front doubles, some of the best out there currently. Andrew is the odd man out, and I think because the other 2 guys are so good but so similar, he has to be the odd man out on the placings as well. If Andrew gets beat by either guy, in your opinion, you might as well just make him the last out of this group. And if he's going to beat one, why not just have him beat the other as well? Personally, I'm going to go ahead and put Andrew 1st in this group and 1st in the shot. He wins the arms and lats, and he has a great midsection and great quads. But most importantly, he's just so huge. Then I have Hadi above Derek, which puts Derek in last here, but 3rd overall. Hadi just has a more high quality pose. I'm giving Hadi the legs even though Derek is a bit bigger. Hadi is certainly big enough. In fact, he's actually got the better upper-lower balance, so his legs are bigger comparatively on his own physique. And Hadi's legs are denser, drier, and more detailed. The midsection and torso heap do have to go to Derek because he's just more exaggerated. However, it is important to note that while Derek wins, Hadi is pretty much perfect. He's a 10 out of 10 in the torso with his wide lats and crazy small waist and vacuum combo. Derek is just sporting one of the wildest V-tapers ever. This is like a 11, probably 10.5 out of 10. And finally, Hadi takes a small win in the arms simply because he's a little more dry and has slightly better peaks. Overall, like I said, these guys are very similar. But what puts Hadi over the edge are the finer details in the legs, arms, and being just as shapely as Derek for all intents and purposes. But maybe you have Derek placing ahead because he is a little bit more exaggerated. This is very, very close. Get used to hearing me say that. Next, we have the front lat spread, and this one is actually quite simple. I have these guys in descending order as they appear on screen. It's another one that's really close though. Largely, I could have most of the placings, especially the lower 3, switched around in any way. Since they do go in descending order, that means Brandon is last yet again. It's pretty interesting how we used to look at Brandon in 2019 and think that his shape was as good as it's going to get in the modern era. But fast forward 6 years, and now he's the most narrow and mediocre guy in the lineup. Not only is his shape probably the weakest, but the lats aren't as good as they used to be, and he still does have the weakest legs up here despite him improving them. They look a little stubby, to be honest. Then we have Derek and Samson in 4th and 3rd respectively. This is a very close duo inside a very close pose. I had this as one of the closest shots in my own Arnold Classic analysis, and Tyler Mannion had this one close on his own breakdown. I believe he had it switched between prejudging and finals. I just prefer Samson's structure, stature, and balance in this shot. Not to mention this isn't even his finals package, which was better. But overall, I just miss a lot lot of lat exposure from Derek despite him improving this pose, and Samson is very shapely but much bigger. He wins the legs, chest, and arms too with this better finals version for sure, if not here too as well. I'm just going to stick with my verdict from my other video and put Samson ahead just narrowly. And that leaves Hadi and Andrew where they usually are in a matchup like this, fighting for first. Usually I keep Hadi in second or somewhere behind Andrew because when Andrew is on and his posing is good, he's not getting beat by literally anyone. However, at the Arnold Classic, while the posing changes were moving in the right direction, he was still making a ton of mistakes and it will cost him heavily today. I don't have time in this comparison to constantly be an Andrew apologist, and that comes with finding different photos where he snaps into the pose semi-correctly for a split second, while the rest of the time he looks like a train wreck. I'm not going to do that. Here he's pinching his lat. He really only has one lat in this pose. He's just lucky that the others are weak while he's so structurally dominant. He's like Samson with a smaller waist and even better front details. Like I said, Hadi usually gets second every time here, except today. He has very good width for a guy of his height, really good actually, and he has fantastic lats. He also has some great legs. If we had a better photo, I think you could tell he's the most separated up here. Now yes, I absolutely hate Hadi's delts in this shot, but I can't really punish him and push him down based on what's up here. Should Andrew get first? Not with that posing, he effectively only has one lat. Samson is not a good choice for first either, although I would be fine with him in second, but he was only capable of doing that with his final package, so only half the show. And Derek is too weak with his lat exposure to be taking the pose here. With that, I think Hadi's just the best choice up here. Everyone has something you can bitch about, from the gross delts to bad posing to borderline bubble guts at times. Hadi has the width, the best lats up here, and great legs. So he's doing the best at outworking his flaw while everyone else is tripping themselves up. The side chest is another pretty competitive pose. Here we're starting with the first place and working our way back. I think most of these poses need a closer look, but right off the bat, I think Samson is just slightly ahead of the pack here. He has the structural advantage that is only matched by Andrew Jacked, but Samson is doing a lot better job of filling it out. Conditioning also isn't a major factor here in a side pose, which is good news for Samson, so he can just coast on that insane level of muscle he's carrying on that large frame. That leaves us with Hadi, Andrew, Derek, and Brandon. I hate to say it, but out of these four, with a closer look, my eyes are drawn to Andrew the most, and not even for bad reasons. Yeah, the posing is awkward, but compare his body parts to anyone else's, and he's going to win pretty much everything, or at least do very well on everything. He has the best arm and delt up here, the midsection is tight and detailed, the pecs are bulging and detailed as well, and while the side leg is technically the weakest out of the bunch, that doesn't mean a whole lot. Derek is the only one with a stellar side leg here. Andrew is still huge, bigger than anyone else, and has decent lines. On top of these wins in the body parts, he cements this win by the same way Samson did, just being too damn big. I can scream about Andrew's posing all day, but the fact is he is now bringing a lot of details and a lot of round muscle on a giant frame. That leaves us with three pretty close poses. They're all pretty even in the upper half, but I'm going with Derek ahead of the last two for the crazy side leg. It's not the side leg pose, but it's a differentiating factor in a crowd of fairly similar poses. And finally, Hadi versus Brandon is quite the stalemate. Hadi is bigger in the side leg, but Brandon is drier throughout, and up top Hadi is wider through the shoulders, but Brandon looks really thick. I hate to be that guy, but I am going to come back and punish Hadi for the delts. I couldn't do it in the last pose really, and I can see them again here. That front one is shiny and lumpy, and the far one is pointy. I think these two guys are interchangeable, at least based on these picks, but since it's 50-50, I'll take the guy that doesn't have the awful looking delts. But all in all, it is worth noting that this pose is definitely more skewed up than down, meaning these guys are much closer to being in the top spots rather than the bottom. All these poses are above average. Now we have one of the most straightforward poses for the most part, that being the rear double. Derek is first, so let's just keep it at that. Best back, best lower body, easy win. In a surprise second, I'm going to have to put Brandon. There is a big gap here between first and second, and there's going to be a big gap between second and third too. But Brandon takes the runner-up spot here because he actually brought some life back to his back. He has great density and thickness and an overall very complete back. Lower lats, traps, it's all there. And he has all the qualities you can want too. He also has good arms and delts. Even his lower body is one of the better ones up here simply because of conditioning. So believe it or not, Brandon actually has one of the most complete poses up here. Then we have our bottom three. Once again, I kind of see Andrew as the odd man out here, and I think this time it's for the worse. Hadi and Samson are just more similar to Curry and are overall more complete. I did almost have Andrew in fourth, but I decided to just put him in last. For one, this is the best photo of him I could find. And even here, he's doing himself a disservice with the posing. He was pinching his shoulder blades together, which robs him of a lot of width, which he should actually be prominently displaying because no one else has that level of width. But it's not just the posing, he also has the least conditioned lower half out of the whole lineup, and his back could be more detailed too. I'm just barely putting Hadi above Andrew for Hadi's win in the lower half. To me in this pose, I don't want the most shredded glutes or hams in this shot, but when I see this pose, I still want a conditioned and detailed set of legs, and I do want those same qualities in the back. This is why Andrew's the odd man out. The lower body is just too unrefined for me. That makes him the least complete since he's lacking some of these qualities, but at the same time, he's honestly the guy with the most potential up here. And after those two, I have Samson taking third. He's edging both of them out, sounds hot, because of the back mainly. The lower half is conditioned enough, still needs to be sharper though, but his back is really round and 3D. Basically, he's just a better Andrew, and Hadi's back is honestly pretty weak. This is his weakest shot actually, so Samson really kind of coasts to third because he just brings a half decent pose. No one else is here to challenge him in this lower tier. But still, Samson and Hadi are the closest to what the other two, Brandon and Derek, are doing. So Samson and Hadi get moved up by having more complete poses, while Andrew takes last here. We're jumping straight into the top two for our second back pose. Derek and Hadi reign supreme in the shot, and here we have two arguments to determine the winner. You could go with Hadi because he wins the width aspect, and that's the most important thing in this pose. He is close in the other aspects in the back too, and he is solid in the lower half. Derek's argument is his stellar lower body and winning the other things in regards to the back, mainly thickness. To me, that first argument is a little more convincing, so I have Hadi taking this. It's hard to argue with his width, especially when the rest of the pose is so solid. Now let's go to the full pick to determine the rest of the placings. It is worth noting that when I look at all of these guys in the lineup, I am reaffirmed that my choice for Hadi in first was correct. Derek is just getting a bit too caught up in the mix. Hadi stands out. Let's jump down to fifth now and let's get Andrew in there. Posing, posing, posing. How many times can I say it? Again, I am going by what I see, even though this pose was better for him at times. And what I see here is unfortunate. He could borderline win this pose if he was actually opening up properly and spreading those wings. But even then, he'd still need a more conditioned lower body to really take the pose. That leaves Samson and Brandon for easy third and fourth place spots respectively. Brandon is a bit sharper in the lower half, but you can't really see Samson's here to be fair. But it's obvious that Samson is bigger and more complete. Brandon looks a bit dainty. But other than that, it's an easy Samson win, just by way of him being a bigger human. Honestly, I can almost have Samson over Derek, but I think Derek's back is just a little too thick and his lower body is leagues above Samson's. We're finishing up on the side poses now, and first things first, we have to trim that fat, and for this one, it's Andrew yet again. Everyone else can manage to do the pose correctly. I know there are photos out there of where he hits it, but quite literally, I don't give a It's not my fault Andrew literally can't hit a pose right in the actual call out. Anyway, now we can have a closer look at four really solid poses. Derek, Brandon, and Hadi are pretty similar, but Samson is jumping out and for good reasons. I have him in first. This pose is about thickness and size while being streamlined. Well, with his pecs, overall structure, and overall size, he's the biggest guy up here. The side leg isn't too shabby either for this lineup. Again, Derek is the only one that's stellar. Samson also has the best tricep here too. I know the midsection isn't perfect, the lower stomach isn't completely locked in, but in my opinion, he's not the worst up here, and the pros far outweigh this con in this instance. And like I said, we're left with three very close poses between the remaining three. I'm putting Brandon in last, which is only fourth here, mind you, for pretty much just being unremarkable. Hadi is just a better Brandon. He has the more separated arm, pecs, the better tricep, and of course that stellar midsection. And then above Hadi, I'm going with Derek, but this is a little iffy. I'm not a big fan, but I think he does enough. Derek has more width than the other two and more overall mass. He's streamlined enough, I suppose, but I'm not a fan of the midsection in and of itself. It could definitely use some more detail. But he ends the pose with the best side leg up here by quite a margin. So overall, I may dislike his shape the most, but he also has the most to offer. Moving on, we have the easiest pose of the comparison, the abs and thighs. It's so easy that we don't even need to view the full call out here. Up first, we have the bottom three guys in this pose. I am very disappointed with the 2023 and 2024 Mr. Olympias here in this shot. They're not even able to hang with the 2019 champion here, which should be easy to do. Brandon is just mediocre, but the other two guys are actively bad. Samson isn't dead last. He has a puffy, bloated stomach, and at times it was even worse than it was in this photo. And in the legs, he has pretty much zero separation. He simply has nothing to offer in this pose. Derek at least has cuts in the quads, the better quads at that. His abs are pretty awful though, and his waistline isn't even looking that small here. Brandon is actually coming out on top. Somehow his abs are the best out of the three, and the waistline also reigns supreme. Heck, even his quads don't look too bad up here. He's not first, but probably not last. At least he has some separation. That's more than we can say about others. And that leaves us with a very obvious top two. The two best abs and thighs poses in the world, as a matter of fact. In the past, I have gotten into a little bit of trouble because I'm usually picking Hadi to win here. However, with this version of Andrew and this version of Hadi, I don't imagine I'll be getting too much pushback this time around. Once again, Andrew can't be bothered to pose correctly. This was actually one of the better screenshots I could muster, and believe me, I scoured all the available footage. Still, even with this half-assed posing, Andrew could still beat just about everyone else in the world. Everyone except for Hadi Choopan. For just these two shots that you see here, you have to go with Hadi. He has more depth and sharper cuts to the quads, and up top he has the much better obliques, and even if you want to give Andrew the actual abs, Hadi is right there with him. But hey, if you're somehow in doubt of my call here, consider Hadi also has a great twisting oblique shot as well as a great vacuum pose. With Andrew, you get an 11 out of 10 abs and thighs pose, but that's it. For Hadi, you also get an 11 out of 10 abs and thighs pose and two other perfect variations. Suffice it to say, Hadi is taking this pose. And finally, we've reached the last pose, the most muscular. And we'll be taking a look at the full call out last for this pose. But we have to eat our vegetables first. Here you see Brandon and Derek, who had the two weakest poses. Brandon had the least amount of size out of this lineup, believe it or not. And Derek was on the smaller side too, but had the least amount of detail. Legs for these guys, you have to go with Derek because he really has no competition. The waist and abs go to Brandon easily though, because Derek's waist really isn't that small without the vacuum, and Brandon has the much better looking abs. The arms and delts are pretty much a tie, but Brandon has a few extra details, but honestly I doubt if you'd even be able to notice them in real life. And then in the chest, Brandon is flat but more detailed, while Derek is a lot thicker but looks like a water balloon. Overall, that's what kills Derek's chances in this one for me. He's great in the legs, but the upper body just looks, I don't know, wet? Like, where are the details? Maybe you want to give this to him just because he's thicker than Brandon, but not me. His chest and delts literally look like he's in the off season. That leaves us with our top three, and out of these guys, I really could have any order. They're all able to bring good poses at this point in their careers. I am going to have to put my beloved Hadi Choopan in third here. I love his pose, he has the crazy details, but it's the most muscular pose, and he is the least muscular out of these three. Now, Andrew versus Samson is basically a coin flip. You get stronger legs and a better overall balance from Samson and a better chest, but Andrew has the better delts and width. For one last look, let's go back to the full call out so we can see everyone together. And yeah, I am going with Samson as the winner here, leaving Andrew in second. They both stick out a lot, but Samson catches my eye even more. Alright, that was quite the beefy comparison, but now it's time to see the scorecard. Well, here it is, and the results are a little odd. Hadi is barely in first. It's a 1-point decision. Then you have Samson right on his heels, Derek and Andrew tying, while Brandon is in a distant fifth. Honestly, I think in a lineup this big, trying to make calls like this in every single pose is very convoluted, so let's do something a little different. For the final section here, I'll put up some footage of Hadi against each one of his opponents, and I'll tell you why or why not he beats that particular competitor. Let's start with the easiest one, and I just don't think there's a whole lot to say about Brandon versus Hadi. Credit to where it's due, Brandon really stepped up his game here at the Arnold, but it's just not enough. Even if everything else was equal, the legs alone would put Hadi ahead. But everything is not equal. Brandon could beat Hadi here and there, sure, but Brandon is still downsized from when he was actually placing ahead of Hadi. And Hadi would smoke him on overall quality while playing that shape game that Curry loves to play. This is pretty self-explanatory. Brandon was in a distant fifth behind everyone, so I don't think he'd be beating Hadi. Next we have Andrew versus Hadi. And I think a pretty simple way to think about this is if Derek got ahead of Andrew, so can Hadi. I know some of you don't like the shorter, stockier guys over the taller ones, but that's just how it's going. Andrew even got his thunder stolen in his three main shots, being the front double, front lat, and abs and thighs. Hadi actually won 2 out of the 3 and was very close in the remaining one. Those poses are Andrew's main pathway to victory in pretty much any of his matchups, and he got cut off there. He also wouldn't win the conditioning debate against Hadi either, which certainly doesn't help. But hey, I'll say this, I say it every time to try and balance out my Andrew hate, but Andrew could have easily won this show and could be Mr. Olympia if he just fixes very basic things. But as of right now, he is not beating the 2024 Arnold Classic Hadi. Next we have Samson versus Hadi, and according to the scorecard, this was actually Hadi's chief competition, not Derek, even though Derek beat Samson at the actual show, of course. I think this one is also pretty easily explainable. This is another reason I don't like huge lineups. Things get overlooked or rewarded too much when they shouldn't be. Conditioning and the finer details are easier to gloss over in a bigger lineup, which is great for Samson. And Samson is also going to stick out because of his structure and height and overall muscularity. However, 1v1 Hadi versus Samson would play out just like Samson versus Derek did. He wouldn't be able to take the scrutiny of a one-on-one comparison. For one, at prejudging, there's just no way he's beating Hadi. The quality advantage alone would be too much. And like Derek, even with his finals version, I don't think Samson would catch up. This was not Olympia Samson at this Arnold Classic, which barely beat a worse Hadi than what we use today. So what do you think would happen if we put the best Hadi ever against a weaker Samson? Hadi and Samson did split poses, but Hadi had the bigger wins. He's very complete, has great shape, and easily wins the conditioning aspect too. And finally, that brings us to Derek versus Hadi. Honestly, maybe even less of a matchup than Samson versus Hadi. To me, Samson and Hadi is the much more interesting matchup because they're so different, while him and Derek are actually pretty similar. For overall condition, that definitely goes to Hadi. For muscularity and completeness, it's very close, but probably goes to Derek. And for shape, it's pretty much tied. And then in regards to the poses, it was 5-3 for Hadi. And he would probably have the higher margins too because Derek had some poses where he fell off and only one knockout pose in the rear double. What's interesting is that Hadi's weakest pose is definitely stronger than Derek's weakest pose, but Derek's strongest pose is probably a little bit stronger than Hadi's strongest pose. This means Hadi just has the overall better average. And I do find him to be slightly more complete and well-rounded compared to Derek. To end this video, let's go ahead and circle back to the final overall ranking. For the most part, I'm keeping it as is. Brandon is in 5th, I'm breaking the tie and putting Andrew in 4th. For one, I think there is a gap between 4th and 3rd, and also Andrew had more last place finishes than who he tied with, which was Derek. Derek won't even be 3rd actually, I'm going to put Samson 3rd because overall I think he deserves it. So I agree with the Arnold placings, but to answer the question posed at the beginning, if Hadi Choopan had entered the 2025 Arnold Classic with his last year's physique, I believe we would be seeing him place first in this lineup. But why is that? Well, he kind of just does it all. The 2024 Arnold Classic package was phenomenal, no doubt about it. He had great shape, the condition was on point, it was the best in this lineup, and he had really good completeness. Even his weakest shots weren't really that weak. This is also why I moved Derek to runner-up because he's more or less doing the same things. He's just trading a little more overall condition for some extra size and thickness. But even he still has some gaps, which ultimately did put him in 2nd to the Persian Wolf. This was a lot closer than I thought it would be though. In fact, I'm not even 100% sold that Hadi is beating Derek, and they will probably be getting their own in-depth comparison at some point. Not to mention, an on Samson Dauda and 110% Samson Dauda would probably beat both. Really, I could say the same about Andrew Jacked, but he is further away from his 100% than Samson was. This definitely does say something about the competition because I do think Hadi's 2024 Arnold package is legitimately one of the best physiques ever. And no, that doesn't mean he's between Ronnie and Phil on Bodybuilding Mount Rushmore. I'm saying on the larger list of the best physiques ever, Hadi is probably hovering around 15th, at least inside the top 20. That's crazy on its own, but think about how close some of these guys were, and how some of them are just getting started. But while they're getting close, they all still fell short to what is probably the greatest physique of the decade so far, the Persian Wolf, Hadi Choopan. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank Supersetman for inviting me to yet another challenge. These are always fun to do, and I enjoy bringing you guys different perspectives on some of these bigger questions in the world of bodybuilding. Don't forget to check out some of the other videos that were a part of this challenge as well. And if you liked mine, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you want to support my channel even further and are in need of some high quality supplements, be sure to head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexi, yeah.